Hello and welcome to this month's video on agricultural risk and price volatility. This month we're going to be talking about the proteins and dairy markets in particular. I'm joined this month by Sarah Reed, who is our lead proteins analyst for EMEA. Sarah, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So firstly, I wanted to talk about the beef market. So really it sort of seems like there's, on paper, a lot of bearish factors out there. Feed prices, grain prices are very low historically. Soybeans as well aren't really that high. There's been no major outbreaks of disease amongst beef cattle globally, but still it seems like in a lot of countries, like within Europe, the US, Australia as well, we're seeing some really high prices, often record high prices. So what exactly is going on? What's really driving these price increases in the beef market?
Yeah, absolutely. The prices are really elevated at the moment in the beef market globally, as you say. So if we start locally here in Europe, it really is driven off the herd size and availability of cattle. So we've seen prices climb since about mid-2024 and just keep climbing month on month, and they're now sitting about 30% above what they were this time last year. And as I say, it's been driven by availability with really robust demand. So we've kind of seen a trend in Europe for the herd to just decrease slowly over the last really 10 years, and there's a couple of factors for that. The beef sector isn't overly profitable relative to other livestock sectors in Europe, so we're kind of seeing farmers move away from the beef sector, as well as environmental regulations and animal welfare regulations constrain the herd size. So we're seeing that get smaller, and that really is just limiting production. It has been a pretty profitable year in terms of the price of beef, so that has really incentivized farmers to get the animal to peak weight. So we have seen that, but that hasn't been able to offset the production levels that we've been able to get. So that's really the driving factor in Europe.
And what about in America and Australia? Is it quite similar in that it's long-term trend, but also a bit policy-driven, or is something else at play?
Yeah, a little bit different in the US. We see a more cyclical herd size in the US, and at the moment we're at the lowest level of cattle inventories in over 70 years. So this is really driving the constrained supply on this side. We've also had biosecurity issues in terms of at the US and Mexico border, and they've closed off that border intermittently since 2024, and this has really stopped live cattle being able to be imported into the US, further squeezing supply. And then if we move over to Australia, their export demand has really driven prices. So with less supply in the US, they've picked up export demand and have been more beneficial in sort of the trade tensions that we've been seeing globally.
Okay. And just going back to Europe very briefly, you were mentioning about farmers moving away from cattle to other proteins. Do you think that there's any potential, even within the next year, for maybe a bit of a reversal on that, and we could see, as a result, beef prices coming down, certainly in Europe, or is that a bit too early to say, really?
Yeah, it's hard to say. We tend to track the sort of beef prices ratio against the milk price, and we are seeing it at highs at the moment in both Europe and in the US, so that could incentivize sort of cattle to move from one sector to the other, but we're not particularly seeing that at the moment.
Okay, all right, well, thank you, Sarah. And you mentioned dairy, so I think that's a good segue into talking about the dairy market. Globally, it certainly seems like there have been some, certainly in the first half of the year, there were some concerns about supply, and that certainly led to some big price spikes in certain markets. In Europe, there was definitely concerns surrounding the supply of milk and just how much that would be compared to previous years. And there have also been some concerns in America just due to the dairy herd having some disease-related issues as well. So is this continuing into the second half of the year, or are we seeing a bit of a reversal in terms of pricing and, just market sentiment?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a bit of a change in market sentiment, and I'd probably push it even back to end of 2024, where we had HPAI or bird flu spreading through the US herd, and that was impacting production. And then we were also seeing blue tongue disease spread through the European herd, and we were really tight on fat stocks. So products like butter that are fat-based, and this was where we were seeing the spike in prices. As we entered into 2025, Europe had a bit of a scare with foot and mouth disease in Germany, and this put more uncertainty into the milk supply, and they have had a really tough season, or relatively tough season, the first few months, where milk supply across Europe was below previous years. We are seeing some more optimism now in Europe, with France now producing more milk year on year, and then we've also seen good component levels, which has actually allowed Europe to produce more cheese and butter relative to the prior year, even though milk supply is down.
So doing more with less, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I guess moving over to the US, we've seen quite a different story now, and we've seen the herd expand to the highest levels since 2021, and component levels be really high. So we're seeing strong milk production out of the US, and this has really alleviated price pressure that we saw in 2024.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Sarah. So moving it on, and you were talking a bit about bird flu in cattle, actually, but if we move on to bird flu, actually, in, birds themselves, it seems like that was a really big topic, certainly in the first quarter of this year, especially in the US. We saw egg prices triple to, I think it was something like $8.50 a dozen, or something quite remarkable like that. And, it seems like prices have come down there, so obviously the situation's getting a bit better. But on a global scale, where are we now in terms of in terms of bird flu?
Yeah, good question. So bird flu has been a massive issue this year. Starting with the US, we did see a huge amount of spread in the end of 2024 and the start of 2025, and it was concentrated in the laying hen sector, and that's why we saw the price of eggs really skyrocket. I think we had about 40 million birds culled due to the spread of the disease. We have seen infections rates slow, and a higher level of imports of eggs in the US this year, and this has helped to alleviate price risk. We saw a little bit of a spike in July, but it's definitely down from what it was. Then moving to the EU, they saw a really significant spread of birds through Poland. Poland's the biggest chicken meat producer in the EU, so this really was a concern. They had up to 11 million birds culled in the first 4 months or 5 months of the year. They worked with the EU Commission to put in some stricter measures to help slow the spread, and they were successful. I don't think they've seen a case since May now. So better, but that did impact production, and they're seeing their meat production down year on year so far.
Okay. And what exactly is the situation out of Brazil? It seems like that's a bit sticky, shall we say, at the moment.
Yeah, so in May, we saw commercial flock outbreak of bird flu. There was one case confirmed, and that pretty much put all exports of Brazilian poultry on hold. Brazil is the biggest poultry exporter in the world, so that does have a big input on global markets. Within 28 days, they confirmed they had no more cases of bird flu in commercial flocks, and so negotiations resumed, and trade started again, and lots of the different trade partners. At the moment, China and the EU still have not yet resumed imports of Brazilian poultry, so that's still a wait and see. But as of today, we haven't seen any more outbreaks in commercial flocks.
Just lastly, on the subject of poultry diseases, I think Newcastle disease has been popping up here and there. in the recent months. What's going on there, and are there any other diseases even that are worth
Yes,
noting?
so I talked before about Poland being able to control the bird flu outbreak, but they still haven't completely controlled the Newcastle outbreak, and we've seen even up till August still outbreaks of Newcastle disease. So that is a really big watch point. We haven't seen it particularly throughout the rest of Europe, but yes, it's still very much prevalent in Poland. And then I guess the next big thing we've seen is Spain have cases of bird flu, the first time since 2023. So that's the other watch point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Sarah, and for all of your insights. And thank you, everyone at home, on the commute, in the office, wherever you are, for watching this month. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.